I'm going to take you on a journey into the human imagination. Back to a time when the values and ideas and dreams of the modern world were born. 200 years ago, monarchy was falling to the power of people's revolutions. Industry and commerce were becoming the driving forces of existence. And advances in science were changing the way life itself was understood. Artists all over the world were inspired by these times of dramatic change. In Britain, a group of poets and novelists pioneered an alternative way of living and of looking at the world. Among them were William Blake, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and William Wordsworth. The enduring power of their writing haunts us to this day and inspires us still with dreams of liberty. On the morning of the 21st of January, 1793, a large crowd filled this square in the heart of Paris. In the center of the square was erected a contraption known simply as the machine. It was invented by Joseph Guillotine. At around 10 o'clock that morning, a man lowered his head into the machine. The executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, pulled the rope. The blade sliced down, but lodged itself in the fat neck of the victim. Sanson hoisted the blade for a second attempt. This time, the head was severed from the victim's body. It tumbled into the basket in front of the machine. A guard picked it out and showed it to the crowd. It was the head of Louis XVI, the King of France. This is a story of revolution, of bloodshed and political upheaval. It inspired a radical change in the way we perceive the world, and the greatest outpouring of creativity in the history of the English language. The story begins some 40 years before the killing of the king, in a world based upon the twin principles of authority and hierarchy. Only nobility and clergy had personal liberties. All others had no rights, only duties. At the heart of this old order was Paris. The Paris police force was the largest in Europe, with one member for every 545 Parisians. Those undesirable to the state would simply disappear. In 1742, two young men met in this city and became great friends. They would sit at the cafes of the left bank to play chess. Here they had ideas that became the seeds of the Romantic Revolution. The names of these two men were Denis Diderot and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. They were philosophers with very different beliefs, but they were united against the existing order. Diderot was convinced that the future would be built on reason.
The finest privilege of our reason consists in not believing in anything by the impulsion of a blind and mechanical instinct. Man is born to think for himself.
But Rousseau championed feeling over thought. He was freely emotional, plunging himself into moods of the deepest dejection and the most serene happiness. He cried openly and often.
To feel is to exist. And our feelings come, most incontestably, before our thoughts.
Both these men believed the system of control in France to be inhuman. Both were preaching freedom and liberty for the individual. They were playing a dangerous game. In 1779, at the age of 21, Blake was being instructed by the greatest British artist of the period, Sir Joshua Reynolds. Reynolds was what we now describe as the ultimate establishment figure, rich, respected, and eminent. He believed in an ideal art based upon study and the classical principles of order, unity, harmony, and rationality. Blake believed the opposite, that the imagination was the force that made great art. He rebelled against his teacher.
This man was hired to depress art. I say taste and genius are not teachable or acquirable, and are born with us. Reynolds says the contrary. Such artists as Reynolds are at all times hired by the Satans for the depression of art. A pretense to art. To destroy art.
Blake was an instinctive libertarian who sought freedom from the system that enslaved him. He eventually abandoned the teachings of Reynolds and became an independent artist. He poured his radical visionary ideas into poetry, drawing, and engravings. In 1780, Blake completed a design for a print that he entitled Albion Rose. It is a young man with his arms outstretched in a gesture of liberation. There is such a look of energy and exaltation upon his face that some people believe it must be a self-portrait. Blake lived in Poland Street with his wife, Catherine, and his younger brother, Robert. All three united in a life of constant financial struggle. Their home was at number 28, now home to a hairdressing salon. Blake had very few readers and was obliged to publish his own work himself. But it remains as a great document of the revolutionary anger of a new generation in an oppressive city.
I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban, the mind-forged manacles I hear.